Welcome to the Townsmen. We're glad you're here. Today we'd like to talk about love and affirmation and a little bit of how they are alike, how they differ, and some of the cultural impacts and things that they have. And
just kind of comparing and contrasting the two together.
Yeah.
For sure.
All right, what you got?
Yeah. So I think it'd be good, obviously, to define terms,
Yep.
right? As you and I both are pretty technical when it comes to our language. We want to make sure that we're accurate.
Yep.
So going to the good old Merriam-Webster Dictionary, 86 edition?
96.
96
We're
edition.
at least
All
not,
right.
not
All right.
surpassed in age by
All right. We are at least older than this book. But
Yep.
I think this would be a good start. So the word affirm. First definition is to state or assert positively, maintain as true, as in to affirm one's loyalty to one's country. Next one is to confirm or ratify, to assert solemnly, to express agreement with or commitment to uphold or support.
Okay.
Right, and I think we were talking about this earlier where, like to affirm something is we're basically just asserting that this is true.
Yep.
Right? Kind of like we are acknowledging the objective truth of this, regardless of circumstance. Where, and I was telling you this the other day when I looked it up, there's kind of a new definition that you'll see as well, which means to express an opinion solemnly, right? It's an expression of an opinion rather than of asserting truth.
Yep.
And I think when it comes to affirmation, what we're really seeing is a 1984 instance where they're trying to redefine the term, because I will be hard pressed to say it will be hard to get rid of the word affirm, right?
Yep.
There are some words that they're just trying to get rid of completely,
Yep.
And just out of the vernacular. But affirm is just so solid, and it's something that we're going to have with us, but they're trying to redefine it. And without getting too much into a rant, it's kind of like the word tolerance, right? Where historically, again, as an engineer, it was tolerance meant that when you're designing something, there are specific parameters that you have to stay within in order for it to function properly. Right? If you're outside of those parameters, it'll either be a danger to the equipment and or to the person.
Yep. Kind of a plus or minus a certain measurement.
Yep, exactly. Sometimes it needs to be more precise. Sometimes it can be a little more forgiving.
Yep.
But now what we see the term tolerance being used for, and this could be in a myriad of situations, right? Like sexuality, my truth versus your truth, that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Is to where historically is here are certain parameters. If you're within those parameters, good, right? If you're outside of those parameters, we do not tolerate that, and we call you back into those parameters. To where now people are openly living outside of certain parameters.
Yep.
And they're trying to force those who are even within the parameter to tolerate what's outside of the parameter.
Sure.
And I think that, not to get too much into the weeds of that, but that is what we're seeing.
Okay.
And same with like affirm, I think. It is we want to affirm things, but instead of affirming truth, we're now affirming opinion.
Yes, and we're treating opinion as truth.
Right.
Lower T truth.
Right.
Lowercase, rather. To put a finer point on it, can we define they?
They.
Like you say, they're doing this, they're
they,
doing
them,
that. Who's they?
Zers. Yeah. No, but I think, and again, kind of building a little bit of context, this has to do with those who I would adopt more of like a liberal philosophy or a liberal view on things.
To get back a little bit more to affirm, I think the definition is still good. To affirm someone is good, but I think we see like the colloquial definition ringing true that whatever the truth is that we are basically backing up or bolstering in someone, that truth is now lowercase truth, and now it's everyone has their own truth. So you're just basically, as far as I can tell from a little bit more of a psychological side of things, you're just supporting someone's either ego or persona or some mix of all of those things that has nothing really based in something true beyond what the individual experience is. So, and that's not to speak down to personal experience. It's very important to have personal experience, but having it more as a lens of how you see the world, but the world still actually exists independent from what you think about it.
Yeah, I think that helps. Well, I mean, it kind of helps to give an example, right? Let's go with the transgender issue, right?
Okay. Oof.
I know, right? That's all right.
A big
you
one.
know, we're in the kiddie pool. We're like, all right, let's
Yep.
go down. Let's get our floaties on. Go down to the deep end a little bit. Okay,
Yeah.
let's tread water there. I think with the transgender issue, what you're seeing is for those who affirm transgenderism, which I think that's kind of what it is. It is a philosophy. It is a view, and
Yep.
that maleness and femaleness is kind of this, arbitrary thing that you can float in between the two.
Yep.
Those who adopt a more liberal view will say, I need you to affirm that I feel like a woman,
Yep.
even though I'm a man.
Like, this is my truth, and you need to act as if it is the
Yes,
truth.
Yes. I need you
Yeah.
to affirm that I am now a woman,
Yep.
and therefore you should treat me as such. Which, on the other side, what we keep going back to is we affirm maleness and femaleness. We affirm men and women.
Mm-hmm.
You need to define what those are first
Yep.
before you even affirm
Yeah.
what that is. And
Yeah.
so I think that's just kind of a microcosm of the greater reality of, I think we love the term affirm, right?
Yeah.
There are certain, I don't think this is a buzzword, right?
Mhm.
We've been using this word for a long time. It goes all the way back to a Latin
Mhm.
based, to affirm things, which it's along the same vein as confirm or validate
Yep.
things as well, right? And so I think it's a strong language. But again, it's what are we affirming? What are we validating?
Yeah.
And I think for those on the more liberal side will say, I need you to affirm my thoughts, my experiences, my feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Which for us, and rightly so, as you said, it's like we don't want to dismiss that.
Yeah.
Maybe they did have a legitimate experience that
Yep.
we want to affirm that, hey, you had an experience. However,
Yep.
sincerity does not always equal truth.
Yeah. Which
You can be sincerely wrong about something,
Right.
which we also need to hold ourselves accountable to that as well.
Yeah.
So,
Well, it goes back to what we mentioned in the last episode of the person with an anxiety attack walking into a hospital.
yeah.
If you affirm their feelings that they're having a heart attack, like they're not having a heart attack, it's an anxiety attack.
Mhm.
They feel the same to someone that maybe hasn't experienced a heart attack. But if the doctor or whomever is at the hospital affirms that it's a heart attack and defibrillates you, you're going to die.
Yeah.
But to affirm the right thing in that person of obviously their experiences mean something,
Yes.
something's going wrong, but you have to figure out fundamentally what it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's very seldom in life, just in general, are things as they appear.
Mm-hmm.
There's usually a lot of, I guess, machinery behind it of like, you got to kind of understand the way the world works, and then you can dig into past these facades, past these personas, past these faces that everyone puts on,
Right.
into what's actually going on.
Right. Yeah,
So-
you're right on that. And it's also kind of with the transgender issue as well. Sometimes what we fail to do is we want to affirm their personhood.
Yeah.
We want to affirm that you are, again, as a Christian, you're made in the image of God.
Yep.
Right? No matter how much you mar that image, you're still made in that image, right?
Yeah.
We want to never detract someone's personhood.
Right.
However, their perception and their understanding of their personhood might be flawed.
And I think what we're getting to is the counterbalance to what we're talking about in this episode is love.
Yes.
Is like, we need to act, and I think to properly affirm somebody,
Yeah.
you have to be able to love them,
Mhm.
and to do that you have to understand what love is.
Yeah.
So should we
Exactly.
get into that?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
great.
And I'll start with this, and that in the most basic, and I think you also have, I think Thomas Aquinas' definition too, I think would be very
Yep.
helpful here.
Yep. That'll come in when we talk about agape.
Perfect. Yeah. At the absolute fundamental principled level of love is God. God is love.
Yep.
I know that's going to ruffle some feathers. I know it, well, I'm not a Christian, so therefore I don't believe it. I'm like,
Well, I think even then we can just treat it conceptually.
yeah,
You know?
if you want to do that. And how I viewed it, and we talked, as we were driving, God is love. God equals love. It's not just that God is loving
Mhm.
or that he loves, but him in and of himself is love. And this is where I do believe that the doctrine of the Trinity is so vital.
Okay.
And that love, there's an object to love, right? You know, you have to love something. And I think within the Godhead, within Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, you have that perfect love.
Sure.
And how I feel and what I think, again, this is a broad and a deep topic, love, right? I think it's something that we experience. It's something that as humans we crave, that we need. And I think it's because of our image-bearingness that we love, right? You know, you got Molly downstairs right now. I don't know if she has a concept of love, right?
I mean,
as
most
a dog.
dogs I don't imagine do.
Right. You think they do because they're giving you kisses and whatnot. But I'm like, is it just because I give you food every time? Like, is that why? You know? And so, but anyways, I think what God does in our image-bearingness is he gives us the opportunity to experience love. And, you know, right when we were starting to talk about how are we going to, you know, approach this episode, is we go straight to the Four Loves with C.S. Lewis and kind of talking about that. And I think that is a reflection of how in our image-bearingness, and that God is love. He experiences that perfect love, or he is love within the triune God. In our image-bearingness, he gives us the opportunity to experience all of these different types of love, and kind of, I would say, maybe the different flavors of love. So if you want to kind of share some of the, if people haven't heard of it before, the Four Loves.
Well, they are in the Bible and elsewhere. I think in Greek, and I think they probably are in Hebrew to some degree, although I don't know them as well.
Yeah, that would have been a good thing we could have looked up. But
we'll get to it. I'm no expert on love. We're still learning. I mean, that's the whole thing of this podcast too. It's like, I'm not speaking from some pulpit as if I know.
Right.
It's like I'm learning and I'm just sharing what I'm learning.
Yep.
And
absolutely.
Everything I say is due to updating.
Yep. For sure.
Anyway, love as it is in the Bible, and I think, my goodness, do we lose a lot of the meat on this bone when we just say love.
Right.
You know, I think we said it last episode, if I can love a cheeseburger, and I can say that if I get married someday that I love my wife, and that we have the same word for that, is kind of, it's too bad.
Yes.
So
I agree.
The four loves get broken down into four Greek words. So I think when the Bible reads that God is love, it means the Greek word agape, A-G-A-P-E. And that is basically the love for all men, including your enemies. And it's like this. How would you describe it?
Yeah. So what I think it is it harkens back to we're all made in the image of God. And, you know, for instance, Genesis 9:6, where it says, a man sheds blood, his blood shall be shed because he's made in the image of God, right? There is such an elevation to the sanctity of our image-bearingness, right? In that what we are to do is to love your neighbor as yourself, right? You are a fellow creation of Adam, right? Or not creation of Adam, God in creation. So what I really think that is talking about is, you know, love your neighbor as yourself and love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, right? Is really at that core principle that God is love, and that kind of just spreads out to every other affection that we have. And I think the ultimate affection that we have is first for God, our Creator, right? We should love our Creator. And then subsequently, because of that love for our Creator, we also love His creation. And that's more than just, I love my neighbor as myself. We're being good stewards of the land, right? We're cultivating the land. We're being good stewards of it. You know, when we interact with people as well, you know, we are to doing with loving kindness as well. And likewise, again, you know, tapping a little bit into the affirmation piece, is we want to affirm their personhood as well. We don't have to affirm their lives, but we want to affirm their personhood. We always want to maintain that sanctity whenever we're talking to someone. That is why murder is such a heinous act, and rape is such a heinous act, because you are killing an image bearer, and then you are violating an image bearer, right? Their most intimate part of them, you are violating them. And that's why it's so potent, and that's why I think the Bible just, it hits on it so hard about that with those who thirst for justice, right? When we hear that someone is murdered, our immediate response is that murderer should be killed for what they have done. Or same with a rapist. I would argue it's on the same line, because you are violating that image bearing. And I think with that agape love, it is because of that sanctity and that purity of God himself and of our image bearingness. We're made in the likeness of God.
Yeah.
Not that we're little g's.
Yeah.
As some theologians want to state.
Yeah.
You know, but they are kind of hitting to a point to where, yes, we are created in the image of God.
Yeah.
And so
I like to put things a little bit more conceptually, because there are some times in my life where the whole God Jesus thing, it's just like, yeah, I've heard it 1,000 times, and you almost get cringed out by it.
Sure.
And to broaden it a little bit for people that maybe don't know some of that stuff, I think Thomas Aquinas has a very good definition of it, of what agape is. He just defines love, but I would argue this is what agape is to will for the highest good in another, and then make it happen. You know, do what you can to affirm it, I guess, really, like just to be there to make it happen. And I think the reason that is a little bit more conceptualized is when he says something like the highest good, which in my mind rings of that is what God is the highest good. Yeah. Which to a modern kind of sentiment, well, rather postmodern, I guess at this point, that's still pretty religious language. Yeah. And I think you start digging into, you know, like the biology and the psychology of things, you can get to like, well, you know, do we have free will and all this kind of stuff, which I think is a little too minimalistic, or that's maybe not the right word. Yeah. But it just boils things down to the point, like, why does it matter? Yeah. It's like the highest good is something that even to someone more scientifically minded, which I used to be. I mean, in many ways I still am.
Yeah, I still think you are. It's just now there's a different light that's shining at the data.
Right. It's like, yeah, well, there can't be a highest good. We're too individualistic. We're too whatever. It's like, yeah, but I think it's good to treat the world and other people as if there is one. I think even Jordan Peterson says that. It's like, I don't know if I believe in God or not, but I act as if there is one. That's at least what he used to say when I listened to him in the 2017, 2018 era. Yeah. I can't say for nowadays because I don't listen to him. But I think that's a good way of kind of setting the bar low enough for people to like jump on board without having to swallow all of the religious connotations to it. Right. And at least for me, it makes it more practicable. Sure. So anyway, I would say that's agape. You got anything else to say on that before we move on?
Yeah, well, it just reminded me of the first question in the Westminster Catechism is, what is the chief end of man? Chief end of man is to love God and do as you please. Yeah. You know, it's that interesting, and that's just from St. Augustine, is love God and do as you please. Yeah. Maybe I didn't say the Westminster Confession right. There's probably a Presbyterian that's mad at me right now.
You got the gist of it.
Right. Yeah. You know, but it's love God and do as you please. And so, yeah, for those who aren't particularly religious, first you need to define what religion is. Yep. And then I would argue, well, I believe everybody does have a belief system. Yep. It is, but maybe they just haven't explored it quite as much. Yep. And so, but yeah, I think that's a good start with agape. I mean, you can even just camp there for a while, but I think it'd be good if we kind of flesh out the other three.
Well, you can parse it out a little bit, because when you say, you know, if you're dating or in a relationship and you say I love you, it's like chances are what's going through your mind is not that you will for the greatest in them and you're there to make it happen. That's probably not what goes through most people's minds.
Not yet, at least. You hope.
I mean, maybe
you want to get to that level.
I would love to get to that level. I'm trying to do that. Right. But I think oftentimes we fall for, I wouldn't even say fall. It's not it's not worse necessarily. Yeah. The one of the other four loves, which is Eros, E-R-O-S. There's different ways to pronounce it. That's how I pronounce it. Eros, whatever. Yep. And that is referring more to romantic love, and it's where our term erotic comes from. So, what you got there?
Well, and we talked about this a little bit before we started recording, but this is what I think is, when people talk about love, this is what they're talking about most of the time.
Oftentimes, I think. Well, that or Storge, but we'll get to that.
Yeah, and
I think they've kind of muddied the waters at this point, but to put a fine point on it, what we're going to say about Eros.
And I think when it comes to Eros, however you want to say it, right, that erotic love is, number one, we never want to undermine it or underplay it.
Mm-hmm.
I think in its proper context, it's a beautiful thing.
Correct.
How I see that is this is what God has given us to help us understand and experience how much God loves his people, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, marriage is a symbol of Christ's love for his church, his people. And when you get into a marriage, you know, love between a husband and a wife, there should be that intimate erotic love, right? Now, unfortunately, that has been perverted to where people have felt then like, well, I should have an erotic love for God.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, not quite. I think, right, from an objective standpoint, sure, you want to have that intimacy with your Creator, but not from the subjective standpoint.
Right.
And that actually has been heresy, is that the early church has had to detest. That there have been people who, you know, have this erotic love for God. And although I appreciate to a degree the objective point, but anyways, to get back to it, culture and kind of where we're sitting in now, when we say love, this is probably what people are thinking, right? How many songs? Like, you can go to the country channel, you can go to the rap and hip hop channel, you can go to the rock. Like, there's
you can even go to the Christian channel, and chances are it's not articulated well enough to be anything
to where it's
this.
Like, oh God, I love you, God, and like, what kind of love are we talking about here, bud? You know, and it's, and I think what has happened as well, again, that intimate, erotic, sexual love. That's what this is. It's a, you know, one of the highest expressions of this love is sexual, right? Is the act of sex and intercourse. But I think, and unfortunately, we have muddied the water to where there is an erotic love and then there's lust. And it's a fine line between the two. Right? Lust is fantasy. Erotic love is based in reality to a degree.
I'm curious. I've been trying to parse out the difference between the erotic love and the lust. How I think of it, and let me know if this is wrong.
No, but and we're just here trying to understand it together.
The lust seems self-serving.
Yes.
Whereas the erotic love is more about the other person.
I would agree with that.
Okay.
Because
it's kind of not self-denying, but self-forgetting to a degree. Like, you're focused more on the other person. I've heard it said, like, your, you know, marriage to some degree should be like racing for second place.
And I think, without getting too much into the whole, like, servanthood, you know, a lot of that, like, servant leadership, all that kind of stuff. I would agree. How I've always viewed lust, and again, full confess, I mean, I've struggled with it a lot. I think what lust is, right? What lust is it's fantasy. At the end of the day, it is fantasy, and in every fantasy, who is the center of the story?
Yourself.
Right, and that's why I agree with you. Right, it is that what can I take out of this person? And I think, for instance, when I'm lusting after a woman, right, what I am doing, kind of going back to the agape love, is I am honestly stripping her of her personhood, of her humanity, viewing her as purely an object for my pleasure. And that's not good. That's
almost what I view as, you know, the difference between loving a woman and being in love with a woman. Is there's something in that where it's like you are now a part of it. Like, you're putting yourself into it.
That's where the two become one flesh. I think
where the agape, I think, is the higher order of the two, where you actually aren't part of this. Like, everything that you do is operative to that highest good.
And I think it, real quick too, when it comes to guys and erotic love and whatnot, right? A lot of times I think for guys, we conflate the two between lust and love, but really for guys, and this is radical for some women to think this way, but for guys, we view lovemaking as a challenge sometimes, where it's like we want her to experience the most pleasure she's ever had in her life. And I honestly think that is a good thing. That there's nothing wrong with that. Now, it can get conflated.
It can get conflated to be like a reward, or like an award or title you hold for yourself. Like, you know, like, my woman always finishes first, or at least every time I'm with her. It's like,
because
no, that's not really that's still self-serving.
Yeah, and I do think women are a little more in tune with that understanding, where they know if they feel like they're being used versus they're kind of a giving of themselves, right? And really for the enjoyment of one another. Yeah, I mean, we've camped here for a little bit, but I think that is important to understand that erotic love is not lust. And I think that's another issue that we see in our society, in that we say we love something, but in reality we're lusting after it. Right. This is where I think it goes beyond like gluttony, right? Talk about a sin that is almost, we don't talk about and we think is non-existent. Yeah. But that is definitely a thing, right?
Well, it's just been a word that's been co-opted by, now when we say love, we mean lust. It's the same thing with like, and I've been thinking about this a lot because I have friends and family that struggle with alcohol. Yeah. It's like the whole brewery and craft brew thing. It's like, yeah, cool, we'd like checking out craft brews every weekend, or craft breweries or whatever. It's like, yeah, that's just the millennial term for alcoholism. It's the same thing. Like, you like drinking every weekend and getting drunk with your friends, but so it's not on, the rail vodka you get at the store or at the bar. It's just more expensive and tastes different. Right. It's like, I understand there's like the whole societal whatever around it, of like, yeah, you're with your friends, you're having fun, whatever, but it's like, yeah, but that's still fed by a problem. Yeah. And I think it comes to the same degree of love versus lust, where it's like we've kind of shut out lust as a concept, unless you're, particularly religious or something, and that's something that's regularly talked about. Right. And we just say love, and as if it's the same thing, which I think, back to affirmation, is it's suffered this, and I don't know if this is a word, but we're going to go with it, this like colloquialism of like, now all of the common definitions that we use in common parlance are the definitions now. It's like, we talked about that right before we started recording, of like, I wonder if the new dictionaries, because this one is from 1996, if the new dictionaries have all of these new definitions of things that are like, well, now that's how it's defined. Right. So I wonder if that's what's happened with love and lust.
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah. It's something that growing up, it's just what we were inundated with. Yep. And I do believe at the same time, as human beings, just we are inescapably infatuated with love. It's something that will not go away. Yep. And I do believe that we can have appropriate technical definitions for love. We can't. Sometimes we kind of just let it, sail away into this arbitrary, just sometimes conceptual, lovey-dovey feeling things. But it's like, no, there are technical terms for this as well. And I think the final thing I'd probably say when it comes to the love and the lust thing is that lust is an uncontrollable desire. It is something that, and this is something as a young man I didn't realize it, in that you think you have control of it, but you really don't. You are a slave to it, and it's just, you let your mind run free. You don't really, no limiters, nothing like that. And it goes back to like, well, how could you deny yourself? Well, why would you ever do that, right? But then yet, by God's grace, we at least had a church that sometimes
it at least threw the terms out. Right. I don't know if they defined them.
Discipline. Right. Yeah. Self-control, which, I think us as two guys, we're learning that that's what men are. Men are disciplined. Yeah. In the right ways.
Can be.
Right. Yeah. It can be. Should be. Should be. Where love, it's controllable, and I think it's geared for the right reasons. Yeah. Right. And this is where I think the Bible makes it clear, in that you are called to a spirit of self-control. And so just as an encouragement too, as a fellow guy that has struggled, and I know other guys probably have struggled too, it's like, listen, the same spirit that rose Christ from the dead lives within you. Yeah. Right? This lust is not the one unforgivable sin that's like, well, it's just, I can't
off to hell I go now. Like, right. It's irredeemable.
Right. Yeah. And like, you don't understand God quite yet. Yeah. I want you to dig a little bit deeper, and you don't have to give in to your lusts. Yeah. And as I'm telling you this, I'm telling myself this the exact same thing. Yeah. You don't have to give in to this uncontrollable desire.
You got to invite God into it.
And there is freedom. I've met guys that says, listen, I'm out of the woods. It's still, the temptation's still there. Yeah. But listen, it is doable. Yeah.
For sure. Just as a last thing with Eros, even with love and lust, the erotic love and lust, I think it can definitely go bad. And I think even the Bible doesn't ever actually use the word Eros. Well, I mean, it uses love all the time, but it doesn't have that Greek word in the text in either the Old or New Testament, but it refers to it often and usually as a caution to when it goes wrong.
Yeah. All right, what are the other two?
On to Storge, which is Storge. Let's see. It's basically just the love we have for our parents, our siblings, children, and other family members.
Yeah.
Also called natural affection. I would argue and disagree with you a little bit of where you said the erotic love is what we usually hear. I think that's often the case. I'd say it's either that or this, which is just the general affection that we have for everyone.
Yeah.
Of like, you just say, I love this, I love that. And it can be the object of Storge, to my understanding, can be kind of anything.
Yeah.
It can be a food. It can be whatever.
Your pet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it can come and go. It isn't a lasting thing, but it's...
Yeah. No, you're
affectionate towards something.
Yeah, you're right.
That's it.
And I think that's a good point that you bring up, where I think it's something that we experience far more regularly than Eros, and to a degree Agape, and even Philia when we get there.
Yeah.
But I think it's so baked into our experience that we don't really acknowledge it sometimes. Right? Like I remember it's, with my mini Aussie Bella, right? I've been away from her for about 12 hours now, and it's like, I kind of miss the little dog. When I walk into the door and I see her little tail wagging, her little nub wagging, she's excited to see me. It's like there's that affection. I'm like, I love this little thing.
Yep.
Yeah, it's annoying sometimes, and there are some instances where I'm like, man, this is frustrating having her.
Yep.
But I love her. I care about her. You know. And so I think you're right in that Storge is something that we experience so regularly, and I think it probably has to tie into, get a little bit in the physiology of it. I think it's like the little bit of the dopamine hits that we'll get from time to time. Those little trinkets of things here or there that like kind of fill us up and that we enjoy.
Yep.
I really do think that you're onto something, or it's something that we experience far too often, but maybe we just don't acknowledge it.
Yeah.
Or even know.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think you're on to something with saying that we experience it too often. I was reading Kierkegaard's Works of Love this morning, and it would have been a book I would have loved to get all the way through before recording this, but it's really long, and I didn't have that much time. But I'm working on it.
Good.
Cause
Part 2?
I doubt this will be the last time we talk about love.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to bring up about Eros, was between erotic love and lust. We could do an entire episode on that, and I'm sure at some point we will.
Right.
Because I think that's a deep pond, man.
Yes.
I mean, I've struggled with that. I know you said you've struggled with that. I mean, I don't know many guys that admit to having struggled with it, but it's pretty obvious that we all do.
Yeah.
And it's not just men. I know women that have struggled with that too.
Yeah.
It's a human problem. It's a sin. We can talk about it. We can work through it.
Right.
So, anyway, I think back to what Kierkegaard was saying is that, love is one of those things, and I think affection, particularly Storge, is one of those things, like some of us have always kind of had it. It's like hunger. I think he says something about, like, if you were raised in a household that always had food, you don't know to appreciate food for what it is because you've never been hungry.
Yeah.
And I would say it's the same thing with affection, of like, because there's so many things and people around us that we can like this, we can like that, we can have affection towards this, and it's not a bad thing, but it loses its sweetness after a while. Like, you lose the real depth of what affection is.
Yes. That
it's, I think, oftentimes just confused with familiarity or proximity.
No, to be honest, like, I think you're hitting a nerve there, because I think about it a lot. Like, for instance, with my experience with my family.
Yep.
Right. I know we all love each other.
Yep.
I know that conceptually.
Yep.
Right. But the experience of that Storge, again, this isn't like a confession time or whatnot, but I grew up with a father, kind of like a tough love type father, you know, a little distant at times. And I think what happens is Storge is kind of like that routine. It should be that regular affection that you should be getting and receiving, right? You know, receiving and giving, right?
Yep.
It's kind of this bloodline, if you will. And if that goes away, or if you're deprived of that, I think this is where then you get those perversions of like the erotic love, which is again a good thing. It gets perverted into lust. You know, the Philia, right, which we'll talk about in a little bit, right? That could get perverted to something else. And so I think Storge is just kind of like this affectionate air that we should be breathing.
Yeah.
And it should be something that it should be, I think, geared firstly towards other people.
Yep.
And then I think just out of our image bearingness, it pours into other aspects of our life as well. Like, you know, I love a McDonald's Big Mac.
Yeah.
They're really good. I love a McDonald's breakfast too. Their
Yeah.
hotcakes.
Just had that the other day.
Straight fire, homie. You know? Sorry, I'm trying to make sure I'm hip.
Yeah, I think that just proved that we aren't. So.
You know, it's like your 50 or 60-year-old dad, like wearing the backwards hat, and it's like, yeah, what's up, bro?
Yeah,
like,
that's kind of what it sounds like.
Dad, it's okay. It's okay to be a dad. You know, even though I'll probably do that if I have kids to just mess with them.
Yep.
Because it would be hilarious. It's a rite of passage.
You got to annoy them a little bit.
It's a rite of passage.
You're
but
not quite a dad if they think you're cool.
Right.
You got to be uncool. That's
right. You just got to embrace it, man. It's
an uncomfortable badge of honor.
It is. But I think with that Storge, again, right, it should be something that you're receiving and that you're giving, right? I think it should be in the daily. It should be within our experiences. But I think because, there's, again, not to get big into the other problems, like, the fatherlessness.
Yep.
Right? If you don't have a father that is loving you, affection, right? A motherly affection is a wonderful thing.
Yep.
Don't ever get me wrong, but there is something different when a father says, listen, son, I love you.
Yep.
I'm proud of you, right? It hits differently, man.
But, yeah, it almost feels like your mother loves you automatically and you kind of have to earn it from your dad.
Right.
Even though I know I didn't have to earn it.
Yeah.
But there's a certain amount of, I don't know, some weird tension there that you feel like you still have to do enough things that he likes and notices for him to notice.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's what can happen too, especially for boys with their dads and sons right now. I just feel like I have to earn the affection of my father, and that shouldn't be the case. I really don't think that should be the case.
Right.
Yes, respect is earned. And I think that's where we were talking about this a little bit, like, fathers, when you're raising your son, understand that you're raising your replacement, right? Yeah. And you want, like, you talk to any father, it's like, I just want my kids to be respectable. I want them to be productive members of society, right? I don't have to go to jail and visit them, right, for screwing up, right? I want them to be respectable people.
Well, it's like you're their teacher, and any teachers, if they're actually a teacher and not just a narcissist, they're wanting their students to do whatever it is the students do better than the teacher did at whatever the teacher does.
Yes.
I remember a guitar teacher I had said that once. It's like, I want this kid, me, to be better than I am. That never got to be the case because I kind of gave it up. But that's what a teacher's supposed to do.
Yes. No, I completely agree on that. That is a good point. You want to pass that torch on, right? Yep. You want to set the bar high. You want them to achieve, and you won't just hand them the torch. They got to earn the torch.
Yep. And I think in there too is the real, if I'm to bring up the differences, the real fundamental difference between like the colloquial way we say affirm and affirmation and what we really mean by love is in that kind of fatherly love, that it's like, look, this is where the bar is. It's up there pretty high, but there's something in you that can reach it.
Yes. It
doesn't matter if you fail. That's okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if in the next year you reach it. Maybe you try whatever the bar is, college or something. It's like maybe you fail a couple classes. That doesn't make you a failure. That doesn't mean my love for you is less.
Yes.
I still love you, that there's something more central to a person, to an individual, that is to be loved more than what exactly it looks like in practice
or their performance. Yeah.
Or their performance.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, and the whole encourage as well.
And that's really what that is. Yep.
Yeah, and I think Storge, that's a good point of like kind of like, well, what does that look like on the daily basis? You know, it's encouraging, it's wanting the best, and again, that bleeds into the agape love, right? You know, Aquinas's definition of it. You know, it's assuming the best in them and doing it, right? And that Storge is just that constant affection, and we're like, I want what's best for you. I want to encourage you. I want to affirm the good that you have, the strengths that you have, right? And I also want to affirm the weaknesses and say, like, here's a blind spot maybe that you have, or here's something we can do, right? They're kind of the best coaches that I've had growing up were not the ones that were like harsh, strict, we always punish you for doing wrong. It was more of like, hey, they always, you know, celebrated when the good things happen, right? What they cared more about is, were we working together and playing as a team? You know, I remember some of the best seasons I had. It was just this great thing where the coach got us together, united as a team, and man, like, it was fun. But then there was also a season where there was a split in the team. We were still successful, right? But what always kind of put a bitter spot on that season that I remember is there was a split to the point to where like a couple teammates got in a fight, and it was like, now we have these two camps and we're divided. Right. And this is where I think it'll feed into the Philia. In that, you know, that Storge is just that affection, that inflow and outflow of affection, where I think you see it in encouragement, you see it in affirming the good, you know, and then also affirming the weaknesses to a degree where you want to change or help them into to getting on a better path.
And I think you've introduced Philia really well. The brotherly love kind of brotherly love that we have for one another. It's, you know, common in like teammates, or especially in soldiers and stuff like that who've been in combat. There's really that tight bond there, or even between you and I. Like, we've been best friends for more than half of our lives at this point.
It's kind of crazy to think that. And I mean, that's because we share a lot of memories together, you know, helping each other out. You know, you're one of the only friends where I could talk to you about anything.
Well, and I think,
you know,
it's important to point out here, it's not like brotherly love is not forged by proximity or convenience. Like, we've been through hard things together. And I mean, even in our airsoft wars, like, there's a bond that you have to tie with people, that you have to struggle towards a common goal with.
And I think, and here's a little bit of a path that we can go down. And I was thinking about this, is when it comes to men and women, right? For guys, and I've seen it, I've experienced it to a degree, that bond that you get for that common struggle for a mission, for an objective, right? You know, I think combat is probably one of the highest experiences. I've never been in combat, but I've worked with guys that have, and there's just this bond that you have. And he says, listen, like, this bond can be stronger than any other bond you've ever experienced, where it's like,
because it's the highest stress thing. It's like, it's the ultimate litmus test of, like, anything that can't withstand this is not gonna stay around.
And I mean, as the Bible says, you know, a two-strand cord, you know, is strong, right? Two are better than one, and then three is not easily broken, right? If you have that bond to where you're not just looking out for each other out of convenience, but really out of necessity. Right? You know, like, my sector of fire is here. If my buddy isn't covering my blind spots, my other sectors of fire, bad things are going to happen. Right? I think, unfortunately, since we're not in a state of war, our military is kind of fractured to where it's now about, well, what can I get out of the Army versus, like, well, what can I give myself to this common cause?
It's very, like, course oriented, and how many accolades can I get for myself, instead of, you know, we went to combat together and we lived.
That unified effort. But I think with women, this is where I don't know. We're both guys, so it'd be interesting to hear from their perspective, because I think they also experience filial love, the brotherly love, right? But maybe it's through kind of a common struggle, but it might be in a different light. You know, like, for instance, volleyball. Volleyball is a really unique sport, where there's men's volleyball and women's volleyball. When you see men's volleyball, right, they have that common bond of, like, I am trying to beat the other team.
Yeah.
Right? But for women, what it seems like, it's a very team-oriented sport. Volleyball is one of the very few sports where you are so reliant on your teammates. You can't do everything.
Yeah, there's no star player kind of thing. Yeah.
Right. And if you are a star player, the other team can really kind of shut you down, right? Yep. And so I think probably what really unites, maybe a female volleyball team is that teamness, maybe.
Yeah.
Again, I don't know. It'd be interesting to see kind of when you hear of brotherly love, right? What does that mean to you, woman?
Yeah.
I'd be very curious to see.
Sisterly love. What does that look like?
Right,
yeah.
Because I think for us, it, and this is something where it's kind of baked. I think it was something where growing up, this was just kind of something that you experienced as a boy, right? Yes, you have that Storge love, right? The affection. But, and we were talking about this, there gets to be that point in a son's life to where it's like, hey, now you're welcomed at the table, right? You have your father and your grandfather, your great-grandfather, just wonderful men that hopefully they've treads that trail, that true path of manhood. They're respectable, they're accomplished, right? And you're encouraging your son to get on that path, and hopefully there'll be a day where they are on that path, they are at that table now. Yeah. And really where I just kind of feel this with my dad, to where maybe growing up I didn't have much of an affectionate kind of love for the Storge, but now I see my dad as kind of a mentor, and we kind of bond over the common struggles that we've had.
Yeah. Right.
And he's still my father. I'm called to honor him, and I still love him and care about him. But there's kind of that brotherly love now with my dad and with my brother too. Yeah. It's like we have similar struggles, whatnot, and we kind of have that common bond between that. So I don't know what you think about that, but
yeah, I think struggling together really does something special to a person. I think some people would call it trauma bonding, which I hate using the T word because it's so overused.
Yeah.
And people call the smallest things trauma. Like, I wouldn't even call most of the things I've been through as trauma, and most people probably would.
Yeah.
Maybe reasonably.
Yeah.
But I think the ultimate example of something that I've heard to explain Philia is, he was a Marine. Well, is a Marine. I think retired at this point. Kyle Carpenter. He's a Medal of Honor recipient. And he jumped on a grenade for his buddies. Like, that's the epitome of it. It's like, I care about you guys and the safety of my teammates and my fellow Marines or fellow soldiers or whomever, more than I care about my own well-being. And I mean, if you ever listen to that guy talk, you can hear it.
Yeah.
Like, he's got it, man. Like, that's the way to do it, man. If there's if there's examples of that we can do in our daily life, then great.
Right. Yeah. And to kind of touch on that a little bit too, is I do believe there are some men that have a greater capacity for that, kind of more naturally inclined. And I also believe that is something that can be trained as well, right?
Yep.
There is that inner coward that everybody needs to face.
I think there's always the seed, and it can be, properly fertilized and watered and
and that's what
bolstered.
And that's
it
what
can be affirmed.
Bam. It's good. No, it's true. And and it's something that I feel, especially as a man, it's like, man, where was this growing up? It's like, where was this affirming of the good things, the noble things? I'll drop the G.K. Chesterton quote that a soldier should not fight because he hates what's in front of him, but because he loves what's behind him. And I would say to his side as well.
Yeah, I was just going to say what's beside him.
What's beside him and what's behind him. Loves his family. He loves his brother. He loves the brotherhood. And that the Bible does say, Peter says to love the brotherhood.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that we're kind of lacking in today's society too, to a degree where your average guy probably doesn't feel like he's part of a brotherhood. Like, do you have brothers?
Yeah.
Guys that you can go shoulder to shoulder, and whether it's the most mundane task or the most wildest crazy idea that you have, do you have a couple of brothers that you can call right now and they'll be like, that sounds crazy, but I'm in, like, do you have that brotherhood?
And I think a lot of guys will have the more Storge kind of relationship with their friends. They're affectionate towards them. They can go drink together, they can whatever, but I think few friends do I have. I would say you are one of them. That if everything went to shit and I called you. And it's like, all right, we're going to figure this out,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going to show up.
Yeah.
And, I don't imagine most people have that. And
Yeah.
I wonder if some of that has to do with masculinity sort of being snuffed out, like true masculinity really being snuffed out, so that real bonding that we can get with other guys is it's rare. And I think a lot of that also comes from, like I just said, that a lot of this brotherly love comes from stress and comes from struggling together.
Oh yeah.
What the heck does the average person have to struggle with on the daily basis that they would need brothers like that?
Right.
And I'm not trying to demote anyone's experiences.
Right.
But I think the more serious the struggle, the more serious you realize, like, oh, I'm not, like, I can't do this alone.
Yeah.
I can't cover 360 degrees of fire here. Like, I need people.
Yeah.
I need friends, and I need to be able to trust them.
Yeah.
And for me to love them and them to love me.
Yeah. And I think, they can kind of get back to the agape love too. It's like, for God so loved the world, like, Christ came down, he sacrificed himself, and he says there's no greater love than this.
Yep.
And to lay one's life down for another.
Yep.
And I think that's something that we're kind of missing. I dropped it on the last episode, but like this rampant individualism that we have. Not to say that you shouldn't care for yourself, none of that stuff, but it's like there's this rampant individualism to where's the sacrifice for one another,
Well, and I think what you see is a good example is like a military unit.
Yeah.
It's like every guy should be the absolute best at whatever he as an individual does.
Yep.
For the sake of the team.
Yep. Exactly.
For the sake of his family, for the sake of his friends, whatever.
Yeah.
It's like for the sake of others.
Yeah. And
it's not about you. This isn't an early 2000s Medal of Honor campaign. You're one guy against 1,000 Germans. Like,
right.
That's not how this works.
Yeah.
You need teammates.
Yeah, I agree. And, unfortunately, a little bit of insight in the conventional army. It's sometimes tough to build that bond because, like, you're there for a couple of years and then you're gone.
Yep.
But I've heard, like, special operations guys, like, these are guys
team guys, stuff like that.
Yeah, team guys that they've been together. And I was talking, there was a retired guy. He actually works as like a financial advisor in Fort Sill.
Mm-hmm.
Older dude, but he was a 75th guy, turned Green Beret. And he retired in the year 2000. So, like, he was in it for 20 years. So just before, he probably did, like, Panama.
Yep.
He seems like a great guy, by the way. But I asked, like, what was your experience with the Green Berets? He goes, oh, man, you build a bond
It's not going anywhere.
Yeah, that, like, it's hard to explain. Words cannot describe the bond that you'll have with guys like that.
Yep.
And I think you can build that anywhere you are. It's difficult sometimes, especially like in the military, if you're moving a lot and whatnot, to kind of build those bonds with other guys. That would be another thing. It's like, can you have filial love for a woman?
I don't see why not.
Yeah.
I think to some degree your marriage should require that.
Yeah, I think so. There should be a friendship, and there should be a brotherly affection, if you will, there. But I think this is where, like, the Eros, like, it gets really conflated. And again, this is where the English language sometimes does it's difficulty, but then yet even at the same time, it's like, I love you. And you say something like, I love you, man. I was like, what do you mean by that?
I think it's important to understand that all four of these things,
the
Agape, the Storge, the Eros, and the Philia, there's almost a benefit for having one word for all of them if you know what the other four are.
Right.
And especially to articulate that with your partner.
Yeah.
Like I've dated and I've said the L word probably way earlier than most people would say is acceptable.
Yeah.
But I'm very careful with how I define it, and I use agape to define it. So it's like, look, this isn't just coming from nowhere. This isn't just like, look, you're hot and I love you. Like, no, that's that's not the thing. Yeah. It's like, look, we are called by God to love everyone as ourselves, and that we shall do that.
Yes.
And very rarely do I actually get the chance to tell another human being that.
Yeah.
So when I'm talking with a woman or dating or whatever, it's like, oh, another person I get to tell that to. That the vulnerability is there to be able to share those sorts of things. Like, I can't just walk out on the street and tell someone that I love them and then define it without them thinking I'm a nut.
Right.
Like,
Right. And nor should you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Right. Certain loves in their proper context are wholesome. And
Yep.
you know, it's, yeah, like again with the whole lust thing, right? And erotic love or the intimate love, right? It's in Proverbs, you know, and we've heard it said before, right? Fire in its proper context is a beautiful thing. It's warm, it's cozy, it's inviting. But once it gets outside its proper context, it's destructive, right? You know, and I think you can equate that to the erotic love and all that. But yeah, and again, it's so easy to pervert all the different loves.
Yep.
It is, and I think getting back to kind of the affirmation pieces, we want to affirm the definitions of these love, and we want to validate and confirm these, right?
Yep.
We want to get back to kind of more of that. Let's have these good, wholesome definitions of love, right? Instead of, well, love is just lust, you know, and it's just how you feel, and you need to affirm my feelings and all that kind of stuff, right?
Yep.
Let's get back to where, hey, can we take a step back? Can we affirm what is good? Can we affirm what's lovely?
Yep.
Right? And then let's, if you will, it's I want to say deny, because there's an opposite of affirm, right? You affirm what's true, but then you can deny or you detest what is not.
Yeah.
Because I think in today's society, which we, you know, the rampant individualism, I mean, liberalism has always been around. It always has been around. It won't go away.
Yep.
And I'll even say this too, it sounds crazy for some. Sometimes liberalism, you know, to liberate isn't inherently a bad thing, right? This is where Eros and Affirmation talks about this. He goes, originally that word was actually a good thing, right? We liberated Europe from Nazi rule, right? You know, we liberated, like the slaves were liberated from slavery.
Well,
that's a good thing.
Yeah, and even America was a liberal project.
Yeah.
Like we were breaking free from, I mean, not all of it was based on breaking free from English rule and from its very strict definition of you must follow the English church.
Right.
But they were liberating themselves from that.
Yep.
So in certain ways, it is a good thing.
Yes.
And I think Protestantism is a liberal movement outside from Catholicism.
Yes.
So it can be good.
Right.
But it must be...
Right. What are you liberating to?
Yeah.
That's really the
from
question.
and to.
Yes. Right. Because when you can see that, right, there is, and I know, a different topic, different time, but right, the French Revolution versus the American Revolution. People say the French Revolution is a liberal revolution. The American Revolution was I know it sounds contradictory to what you just said, but a conservative one, where they were both liberating. There was both a liberation, but you see, what were they liberating to? Yeah. You know, from and to. Yeah, that's a good point.
So I think that's good.
Yeah.
Any other tying up thoughts you've got?
No, other than this is a good start. You know, we're dipping our toes in the vast ocean of love, and how I do feel, man, like love and affirmation, love and, you know, lust. You know, it's something that we can continue building off of, and I think it is a good thing to talk about. Yeah. Because far too often, I grew up thinking that lust equals love. Yeah. And that's just not true. You know, maybe I was deprived of the Storge love, maybe, you know, and hopefully this will give people a tool, you know, kind of a jumping off point or an encouragement to, hey, start examining your experiences that you have, right? Instead of just, all right, because there's been a season in my life where it's like, whatever I feel, I'm just going to do it, right? Or whatever I think, just kind of let these go. It's like, no. You can have a spirit of self-control, right? Take a step back and kind of help articulate how you're feeling right now and what you're thinking right now. Yeah,
and I think it's important to mention too, like there are specific definitions to these four loves, but they interact and they overlap. Yep. And especially with Agape, it necessarily feeds the other three. Yes. It's the highest love that there is. It's the love God has for us. Yeah. And then that's kind of what we get to parse out to everyone else. Right. So. No, you're right. And again, the object of your love too. I'll finish off to say this, and maybe this is kind of a little bit of a cliffhanger, but, you know, John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his one and only son. The world there is talking about the cosmos, his creation. Yep. But then you'll read in 1 John 3:16, it says, do not love the world, right? Yeah. Again, in the English language, that can be very confusing.
Well, he says he so loved the world, but then he says, do not love the world. Like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Right? The world that he's talking about in 1 John 3:16 is the devil and his schemes, right?
Mm-hmm.
The prince of the power of the air.
Yeah.
Right? And I believe that the love on both of those instances, I think, is agape love.
Yeah.
Might have to fact check me on that one.
I would argue it most of the time is.
Yeah.
I mean, you're never going to go wrong by saying that's what it is.
Right.
It might just be more specifically something else.
Right. And we'll also encourage you, okay, maybe you have these brand new words that you just learned. Don't start going around to families like, listen, I Storge love you. Or I Agape love you. I Eros love you.
Yeah.
Brother, I Philia love you. It's like,
yeah,
we appreciate that, maybe if you want to show off a little bit.
Yeah,
but
it's better to define what you mean by love as using the definition of Storge
yeah.
or the definition of agape without throwing that word out there.
Yeah.
Because it's just weird. Like, it's not a common parlance word. I mean, maybe it will be someday, but we're not Greek.
Right.
So, yeah, I was thinking that too before we recorded. It's like, I'm not going to go up and tell the woman I've been talking to, like, I Eros love you. Like,
oh,
what the hell does that mean? Like,
she'll probably be like, do you now?
Like, what does that mean? And okay, like,
she looks it up. It's like, oh, how dare you?
Yeah, right.
Or maybe she's like, oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah. Who knows? But,
who knows, right?
Dig into these things a little bit.
Yeah.
Read about them. I'm still reading about it, and I'm the one recording this. So
yeah, I want to as well. Yeah.
I think we necessarily should, because it's basically the highest commandment we have.
Yes.
Is
absolutely
love one another as God loved us.
Yep.
So if we don't figure out how to do that, figure out what it is, then what are we doing?
We're missing the mark. Yeah.
Yeah.
Amen. So, yeah, thanks for stopping by the Townsmen. Hope to see you next time.
We were glad you were here. Thank you.